Okay, it looks like we've got a couple more people signing on right now, and it is right at noon, so we do want to get going for those of you that signed on. If there's anybody else that joins us, they will just miss the slight introduction. But if I can get started here, we will go. So thank you very much for joining this month's BCMA webinar. We do have a few more people coming, as I said, so thank you to them as well in advance for showing up. My name is Ben Fast, and I am the Programs and Member Services Coordinator for the BC Museums Association. I'll be the webinar's sort of tech help and facilitator today, so if you do have any issues with the webinar, please feel free to email me and I'll try to answer. I am coming to you live from the Sydney Museum and Archives in beautiful Sydney, BC today. So thank you very much to Peter and his staff and volunteers out here for letting me borrow a desk and the Wi-Fi password this afternoon. It does mean that I will probably be answering questions through my phone. So give me a few seconds to respond if you do send me an email. You can also use the chat function. If you find the chat window, that'll also work for you as well. Now, before we begin this webinar, I do want to outline a few quick how-tos, how to use this webinar in particular. So if you've already signed on and you can hear me and see the screen, you're doing great. This webinar does not require a camera or a microphone, so if you're yelling at your screen trying to ask a question, please stop. As I mentioned, you can send the email right there. If you do have a question at some point during the webinar for our presenters, simply use the Q&A box, which should be in the top corner of your screen if you're in full screen, or along the black bar at the bottom of the webinar if you're not in full screen. And I will read out the questions at the end of the webinar or throughout, depending on the timing, so that everyone hears them and we can make sure that everybody gets access to that. And our webinar presenters will respond by audio. Now, I do have a quick BCMA news item before we get going, and that is that registration is now open for the BCMA 2018 annual conference. You can see here on the screen that early bird registration is open now through July 14th. The conference itself is in Kelowna. It's from October 21 to 23, and that includes the date of our pre-conference workshop, the 21st. The rest of the conference kicks off that evening. So you've got plenty of time to sign up both before the conference and before the early bird registration ends. We will be releasing more information about the conference program, such as events and other news throughout the month. So make sure to follow the hashtag BC Museums on Twitter or Facebook, or to check back on our website regularly. There's information right now about registration, bursaries, volunteer opportunities, and a little bit about the program upcoming under the conference tab. Okay, but for now, that's enough about the BCMA, and we'd like to go on to our presenters. We have two presenters joining us all the way from beautiful Haida Gwaii up in the north of BC. Nathalie Macfarlane is a museum consultant and the former executive director of the Haida Gwaii Museum, who has helped the museum transition to a new collections management system, and a little bit more about this platform we're going to talk about today, and I'll let her explain that. And we're also joined by Cherie Wilson, who is the Assistant Collections Manager at the Haida Gwaii Museum, responsible for most of the work involved in preparing collections for public access through the museum's website. So if you just give us a quick second here, we're going to transfer our slides over to Nathalie and welcome her on. So go ahead, Nathalie, if you can share your screen, that'd be great.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm welcome from Haida Gwaii. Just an intro screen to show who we are, and I think Ben has introduced us pretty well, so we'll just move on to the next slide. So I just want to give you a bit of an overview of where we are, and so we are the Haida Gwaii Museum. The Haida Gwaii Museum was opened in 1976. We're located on a beautiful site on the Skidegate Reserve. The Haida name for this place is Kailnagai, and the whole place here on Kaikun Point, or Kailnagai, has a very deep history going back thousands of years, going back even to the era of the supernatural. So this was a place where supernatural beings both lived and played. So we're extremely honored to have a museum in this very special location on Haida Gwaii. So our mission statement for the museum as a whole is to inspire understanding and respect for all that Haida Gwaii is. So we started out, as you saw in the aerial photo, we started out as a 7,000 square foot facility. And in 2008, we opened a 53,000 square foot facility. So beginning in the 1990s, the museum entered into a partnership with the Skidegate Band Council and with Parks Canada. And the result was the Haida Heritage Centre at Kailnagai, which includes an expanded museum. And the museum buildings are located at the extreme left of this photograph. And the Haida Heritage Centre is made up of a number of facilities, including classrooms, art studios, a performance space, as well as a canoe house. And there are also, this is also the headquarters for the Gwaii National Park Reserve. And so it includes an office complex, which isn't quite visible in this photo. So I'll just take you very quickly through the permanent exhibits at the museum, just to give you an idea of what we look like. Oh, there we go. So this is the entry into our permanent galleries. This is called Oral Histories in Science, and it's where we juxtapose what archaeologists and geologists have found out about the history of Haida Gwaii with the origin stories of the Haida. And it's really one of the things that we discovered as we put this museum together, is that it's almost as if science is catching up with the history that the Haida have passed on for generations. This is a look at our main, one of our main galleries. We call it Keeping Our Way of Life. And there are a number of themes, that overarching themes that inspired the design and the layout of the museum. One theme, one thing that governed how we looked at things is the inextricable links between the supernatural, natural, and cultural worlds. And the other thing that we've tried to do here is to bring the past into the present. And that sounds pretty obvious, but we bring together both the older artifacts together with recent commissions from contemporary artists. Just a few other looks at, we also have a visible storage system, very much inspired by the UBC Museum of Anthropology system. So about 85% of our collection is accessible to viewing. Another look, these are drawers that can be opened by the public. We have an extensive argillite collection, which is the black slate carved almost exclusively by the Haida. We have quite a large collection of argillite. So coming back to our topic here, the archives. Now, many museums have archival collections, but often they're kind of an afterthought. So like many museums, our archives collection was accumulated over many years, beginning with the museum's founding in 1976. But really, the archives did not receive very much attention. However, in the mid-1980s, the museum, the former directors hired a professional archivist, and a proper archival cataloging system was initiated. So our archives collection includes all of the museum's paper media. So that would be everything from photographs to works of art on paper, to manuscripts, documents, maps, pretty much everything that is on paper, as well as audiovisual and digital media, which is like a huge, as many of you know, is a huge growing area in collections management. So this, I'll just go to the next slide here. Is that just a minute here? Okay, so I'm going to get right into eMuseum. That's the purpose of this webinar, is to explain really how we brought our collections online. we're very fortunate in that we were able to purchase software that has really enabled this in a very seamless way. So eMuseum is a proprietary software designed by Gallery Systems, specifically for museums, art galleries, and other collections-based institutions to share their collections online. And it works together with TMS, the museum system, which is a collections database software also distributed by Gallery Systems. So in order to use the software that we have used online, you do have to have the collections database, which is the museum system. So I'm just going to show you a bit about how TMS works because it's so linked with eMuseum. So this is our catalog form, and this is our archives catalog form. So all of our collections in the museum are now on TMS, but we have a specific catalog form within the system to deal with archival materials. And we transitioned from Microsoft Access database system to TMS. And as I mentioned earlier, a professional archivist had set up the system many years ago, and we preserved all of our original cataloging fields, but we also gained quite a number of new functions and fields that are embedded in TMS. And throughout this process of transitioning, we worked with staff at Gallery Systems. So here's our catalog form. You can see it's pretty well pretty straightforward approach. And down here we have a number of, but we have all these, this menu of different tabs that open up to different fields. So we'll just, okay. So what I'm trying to do here is show you some of the fields that are embedded in TMS. So there's quite an extensive, for example, under notes on that menu bar halfway through the form, gives you a whole lot of options to add information to your catalog. So in this case, Francis Poole is kind of a notorious person on Haida Gwaii because he is believed to have actually brought the smallpox epidemic that devastated the Haida in 1862. So, but this on the right-hand side, you see one of the curatorial remarks opened up so that you can read the full text. So it's a wonderful system. We really like it. We're certainly not using all of the functions yet. We are dealing with updating and correcting 40 years of cataloging by many different individuals, including students and volunteers, et cetera. So it's quite a task, but we are very happy with it the more we work with it. So just a few of our historic images and how we started eMuseum was that in 2016, the museum hired 2 individuals through a federal employment program to begin scanning the museum's photographic print collection, which numbers approximately 6,000 cataloged images. So virtually all of our photo collection is donated by individuals, with some also donated by institutions and another small percentage purchased or the result of commissions to photographers. So that number doesn't include our slide collection, it's just prints. It doesn't include slides or digitized collections that are on CDs and DVDs. The prints, the photo prints were all scanned at 600 PPI as TIFFs and stored in 2 hard drive locations. A third set of working copies is stored as JPEGs. And simultaneously throughout this process, the scanned JPEG files were uploaded to the collections database. And this process was undertaken before we began considering our goals and objectives for sharing our collection online. But it was a huge leap forward, and to have two people basically working for 2 years on digitizing both it was also our audio collection and our photo collection. So just a few images there from our collection. So now I'm just, our goals for online public access to the museum's photo collection are pretty much in line with our overall museum vision, which I shared earlier. Basically, to share the collection online, and to create a platform that was accessible to our communities, students, partners, researchers, and the general public, to promote learning and interest in Haida Gwaii's history and culture, and also, I think really importantly, to facilitate an enjoyable online experience of the museum's collection. Oops, just go back here. So one of the first steps, once we had digitized our collection and linked them to our catalog forms, there's another little step that we had to do, which is to make on the catalog form, which was to make them accessible. And you can see, again, looking at this bottom menu bar, there's a media tab, and when opened up, it gives you the option of public access. So public access is ticked both in 2 places, down here and also at the top of the form. So now we're going to move right to I'm sure all of you have done this, but basically you can access the museum's e-museum or online photo collection either through the museum's website at haidagwaimuseum.ca or through eMuseum's own website. So we have our own website for eMuseum. It's called haidagwai.emuseum.com. And if you come to the museum website, you basically go to the menu and eMuseum is listed there. So when you go into eMuseum, this is the first thing you see. And you can see here, there's again another menu bar. This is the main page on the eMuseum website. And one of the more innovative approaches to our eMuseum is the grouping of our images into theme collections. And this offers one way of viewing historical photographs without having to enter any search criteria. And it's probably one of the more enjoyable ways. And we find that that is the way people generally, the general public tends to view this collection. So this is what, when you click on collections in that menu bar, this is what you see. And each of these little icons includes photos on particular themes. And I'll just go to the next one. It gives you. So that's a few more. We have, overall, we have 28 different collections. And those collections are based on some inherent groupings already evident in our collection. For example, one of the founding collections donated to the museum is the Phillips Dalzell Fonds, or collection. It's a series of 30 photo albums, each dedicated to one of Haida Gwaii's historical communities or resource industries, and a number of other topics. Other collections are based on photographers, for example, or events. For example, here is a whole little portfolio on Jim Hart's potlatch in 1999. Or the Haida Gwaii Observer donated a huge collection of photographs to the museum, so you could click on those. So that is, and I'll just show you how that works. So if you choose, you click on one of those, this is what you open up. So in this case, it's Canoes, Boats, Ships, and Captains of Haida Gwaii. And then if you go to View All Works, you come up, you see that here that there's 130 different photographs in this particular collection. And of course, boats are very important on Haida Gwaii, going right back to the famous Haida canoes. And if we open up one of those images, this is what you see. So you get, basically what we've done is tied a number of the fields in our catalog database to eMuseum. So we haven't tied them all in, but this is basically what you get. This is the Thomas Crosby mission boat. And you see the description is open here, and it tells you also what search terms are linked to this particular photograph. Okay, so there are a number of ways you can search through our collection. Some of them are very standard. Probably one of the best ways is to use our thesaurus and subject headings that are used in our archives to classify photographs. And this is pretty standard, traditional archival subject heading system. And so you can, for example, so this is what I'm showing you here are the subject headings opened up. And so if we were to search for museums, you can see that, that the museum field, this is what's coming up here. There aren't very many of the museum itself in here yet. But so that's, I would encourage you to go to the site and find the more specific and advanced ways of searching a site. Just one of the things that I wanted to discuss briefly was some of the issues, more of the ethical issues that we dealt with in putting together the eMuseum site. And they're not very complex issues, and some of them are very specific to Haida Gwaii. So one of the decisions that we made was to exclude any photos of skeletal remains. And this is a very sensitive issue on Haida Gwaii, and it goes back to the smallpox epidemics of 1862, when approximately 95% of the Haida population was wiped out by that disease. So you can imagine, how do you deal with not only psychologically, socially, emotionally, but also physically with the number of people dying. So all over Haida Gwaii, there are human remains, and sometimes they are not, they're very close to the surface of the ground. And so it's a big issue on Haida Gwaii, and we decided to exclude any images, and we do have quite a few, because some of the historical photographers of historical Haida village sites photographed these collections or these skeletal remains as they were. So the second ethical issue that we dealt with were photographs of children. So we made a decision that no photographs of children that were less than 10 years old would be featured on our website. Now, most of the images we catalog are older than 10 years, but occasionally, because we do photograph historic events such as potlatches and other community events, children are included. And if those images are to be posted to the online site, they will remain unidentified in any online description, in any online descriptions. So the other thing we dealt with were copyrights, and these are pretty standard issues that people will have to deal with if they're putting up an online collection. And what we're talking about here is the respect for copyright that's held by artists, photographers, and institutional ownership of original images. A number of Canadian museums have donated high-quality prints of their Haida photo collections in the earliest years of the museum's development. And although technically many of these historical images are now in the public domain, we credit the source and the number of any images from other institutions. The other thing is that you cannot download good quality images from our eMuseum site. There's nothing stopping people from taking screenshots, but you know, the quality of screenshots for reproduction is not very good. And we do on every photo, we have this little statement. This accompanies every photograph on our website. The images are provided for research purposes only. Other uses require permission. So in other words, if you want a copy of a photograph, a high-res copy of a photograph, the museum will provide that for a fee. Yeah, so that's how, in a nutshell, how our eMuseum looks. And if you have any questions, please go ahead. This is another shot of our beautiful location and buildings at the Haida Heritage Center in downtown Skidegate, Haida Gwaii.
Well, thanks, Natalie. I'm just monitoring the Q&A and I don't see any yet. Just a reminder to people that you can find the Q&A button in the top right corner, I believe, maybe top left corner on some computers, or if you're not in full screen, it might be on the black bar at the bottom. Now, I do have one quick question from Kate, and she asks this with a smiley face, but what about the cost?
The cost, good question. I don't actually have that information. I was hired to oversee the development of the catalog system and the eMuseum. It is expensive. It is expensive, I can tell you that much. And I'm sorry. I think you can go to Gallery Systems and request that information. I have to say that the support we receive from TMS and for eMuseum is very good. I mean, obviously there are huge issues when you're transitioning from Microsoft Access to a sophisticated relational database that TMS is.
Yeah, and this might relate to that point. This is from Lindsay. Why the choice of this software over others such as Past Perfect?
Yeah, well, we spoke, a number of museums, Canadian museums do have TMS. I myself am not familiar with Past Perfect. It's a really great database system. It's a dynamic system. It allows you to link all kinds of things together in your collection. It allows you to track loans, where objects are, if they're being shipped out for loans, or if they're being used in an exhibition. I'm not familiar enough with Past Perfect to make the comparison.
That's all the questions I have for now, Natalie. If you have other points you wanted to get to, we can ask some more questions in a bit.
No, if people have any further questions, they could, the question on cost, if the person who's asking would like to email me, I could provide some information on that. So,
we can include we can include your email in the follow-up email for sure.
Okay, very good.
And I don't see any other questions at this point. If anybody does have questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A. So Natalie, did you have other things you wanted to cover while we wait for some of those?
Yeah, well, I'd be interested in any feedback that people have to our e-museum. If people who are attending the webinar right now have any comments. All of this is very new for us. We know that it's far from perfect, and as I mentioned, we made the decision to go ahead and put our collections online, and because the collection is linked, the e-museum is linked to our cataloging system. Some of the errors embedded in catalog descriptions tend to go up on the e-museum, and one of the things we're doing now is going through to make any corrections and to improve the overall quality of the e-museum and our cataloging. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But as all of you know, cataloging it's got to be one of the most labor-intensive occupations. It takes time and it takes research, and it's important that it be correct. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So Michelle has a question sort of about the means of getting feedback from users to further improve the product. I guess, as we mentioned, Michelle, if you are wanting to provide feedback right away or just directly, we will include Natalie's email. But Natalie, are there ways that people, just sort of regular people using it, provide feedback?
Yeah. Okay. There is. Cherie, is there a way they can email us from the e-museum?
We do have an email on the bottom of the photos for people who want to access the photos. So if they had any comments, they could email that address. But other than that, it's been like face-to-face feedback of community members.
Yeah.
And I'll follow up that, do you find a lot of sort of local people in Skidegate using it, or is the use more widespread internationally?
No, we've had, I'm just coming back to that slide where the museum's address is. Now, that's actually, we would prefer if you used, you can use that address. That's perfect. So museum at Haida Gwaii. So, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought there.
So I was just following up with did you find, or do you find that there's a lot of people who are just locals who are using it, or do you find that a lot of people from off the islands are using the platform?
Yeah, no, it's a lot of local people are using it, and we've had, generally, we ask people, what do you think? And generally the response is very positive. And I think most people are using the collections browsing way of viewing the collection. But we also have had quite an increase from in general, from I would say offshore, we say offshore here, but off-island requests for photo copies, for copies of some of our prints. So that's just the interest in it has definitely generated increased interest in our collection, mainly from researchers and writers, historians, archaeologists, etc.
Mm-hmm. A question from Lindsay again. Have you been able to track the use of your collection? For example, comments and concerns or interest, or even just straight up use?
We haven't refined that yet. We do have the Google Analytics, but we don't use it often. So there is Google Analytics where you can track who's viewing the website and from where and how often.
But that's not built into the e-museum itself.
It is built in. We just haven't established it ourselves yet.
Right, okay.
There is you might have seen, let's see if I can go back to a slide here. Hang on a sec. Oh, that thing at the top there. Okay, so there is a sign-on function. We noticed that it's not working very well right now. So we are working, we haven't, I must say in the last month or so, we haven't addressed it, but we are going to address it. We've noticed that it hasn't been working recently. So you can sign on. I don't know if you can provide feedback there though, or anything like that. Cherie?
Not sure.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten a lot of feedback just because the user accessibility isn't fully functioning yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then we, like I said, haven't established the Google Analytics.
But it is something that we're working on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does the museum use TMS for its full artifact collection, or is this just for the online element?
No, TMS is, TMS is not online. eMuseum is linked to TMS, and we use TMS for all of our collections. So, we have, broadly speaking, we have a number of different collections. We have archaeological collections, we have natural history collections, we have ethnology collections, we have contemporary art, and we have archives. So those are our main categories of collections, and they're all on TMS.
And that's the public access button. Anything that has the public access clicked on it will go onto the eMuseum, and you'll find it in the categories bar there.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have things that aren't photographs on the eMuseum. If you're in our website and click on categories, you'll see that we have prints and so on. So TMS does hold all of our collections, just not all of it is on eMuseum.
Right. So generally speaking, TMS is the full collection management software.
That's right.
And we only have certain fields that go into the eMuseum. Like we customized that as we went along, where we specified which fields we want. Like we want the thesaurus and the constituents and so on.
Yeah, there are, of course, many of our collections have restricted fields, and those are not accessible on the online eMuseum.
Okay. Well, this one's from Chelsea. How did the museum decide what to exclude from the online collections? And also, what was the reason behind photographs of children under 10 not being included?
The decision to not include children under 10 was...
They're still included, just not identified.
Children are included, their names are not linked to their images. And that is to protect those children from any possible online trolling, I think it's called. So it's really, that is the very specific reason for that. So the children are there, it's just that the information on who they are is not included.
And does that mean children currently under the age of 10, or children in historical photographs who would have been under the age of 10 at that time?
It applies to recent photographs that are 10 years old or less, not children 10.
Okay.
Photographs 10 years old or less. And actually, as I mentioned, we don't have a lot, but we just look after that and make sure that that we're not putting a child at risk on the internet. So on the other exclusions, some of our collections are restricted. Now I'm talking broadly now, I'm not just talking about photographs. In our archives, we have things that have been donated by people in the community that are restricted. Some of them are oral history recordings. Some of them are documents. So anything that has any kind of restriction placed on it by the donor, we respect. Yeah, so I hope I've answered that question. We don't have
Sure.
a lot of exclusions except for the ones that I've just mentioned.
Sure, and I think that would cover that. So we have a question about the search function itself. Can you search the collection using people's names?
Yes, you can.
Yes. Now you have to be spelled correctly.
And do you, I mean, you mentioned that a little bit about the having to also work through past collections, the way that it was written, that sort of thing. Do you find that there are a lot of errors, or that there might be names that are misspelled that has caused problems in that way?
Absolutely. For example, just to give you an example, I did mention it earlier, but we have a huge archival fonts here called the Phillips Dalzell collection. And it includes probably about 2,000 photographs and of Haida Gwaii, historical photographs of Haida Gwaii. And just to give you an example, because of the number of catalogers and the number of and the volume of that collection, we might find Phillips Dalzell referenced, you know, maybe 10 times in different ways. And so that is one of the things that Cherie is an expert on cleaning up. So TMS will preserve every single way that reference is spelled from the original database. And so it's up to us to go in and find one and identify the correct way of referring to that collection and basically eliminating all the others. But it's quite a complex process because you have to transfer all of the images that might be referenced under an incorrect spelling into the correct spelling before you can make it disappear. So the cleanup job is you know, it is quite.
Sorry, Nathalie, sorry to cut you off there. Can you just go back through the last 2 sentences or so? We just had a bit of an internet hang up there.
Oh, well, I mean, so it is quite a task to make the corrections. In the case of the Phillips Dalzell collection, if you have 10 ways that it's referenced in the collection and you have photos listed or stored in each of those 10 different references, you have to find the correct way of referencing the collection and then move all those images into the new and correct way of spelling. My main point was to say it's a time-consuming task, but it's very well worth it to improve your search capabilities.
Mm-hmm. This one's from T. Hurley. Have many people made use of the My Collections feature on the site? I see this as a great opportunity for researchers to keep track of items of specific or related interest to them. So have a lot of people made use of the collections?
That's the issue we're having that we haven't had a chance to address yet. The login feature isn't working at the moment. Like, people create accounts and then they're unable to log into the accounts they created. I personally am able to because I have a user account, like because we do the website ourselves, so I can log in and use the collections. And I do want to fix that because they are super useful to myself for organizing. And, you know, if I find a mistake on the e-museum and don't have a chance to address it, I can put that into my collection for editing and so on. So we are trying to fix that. And I know people do want to because there are people who attempt to sign up and are unable to access.
So it's showing interest for sure.
Yeah, so there is interest.
Please, don't
give up on us.
Give up. We were just discussing this yesterday, actually, that we noticed that it wasn't working again. So it will be fixed. So please try again in maybe a week or so.
Okay. And Rosalind asks, are the archival collections organized in font and series and describes according to, or descriptions according to RAD? I'm sorry, Rosalind, I don't actually know what that is, so hopefully Cherie can do that. And if so, how does the museum system or TMS work between the different organization field and needs of archives versus non-archives collections? Okay,
good question. I am not an archivist, but I can't answer. No, it's not RAD. It's not based on RAD, but we do it could be, and TMS can address an archival, professional archival cataloging system. So really, if I look at the archives at the Haida Gwaii Museum, which are an important aspect, and as I mentioned close to the beginning of the presentation, many museums have archives collections that are kind of accumulated on a secondary basis, and then suddenly they're faced with, oh my God, we have this huge collection of documents and photographs, etc., and it needs to be properly stored. So as I see it, the museum's archive collection is cataloged very well, but we're now at the stage where we need to bring in a professional archivist to address the very issues that you've just brought up.
Mm-hmm. So we have gone through the list of questions that I see on my screen. Give a couple more minutes for people if they do want to ask another one. But do you have any sort of final comments you'd like to share about the process and about what it's been like for the organization to switch over to an e-museum?
Yeah, well, it wasn't really switching over to an e-museum. We switched over to from Access to TMS, and a general cataloging system. And e-museum is an offshoot of our cataloging system. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're very happy with the cataloging system we have. And this is a constant task of improving things, and we'll soon have more of our own collection, the non-archival collections on eMuseum, but this was where the digitization, because we had the head start with digitizing the archives collection, we were able to do that. In the case of the general collections, the photography, the need for photography, and the amount of time that task takes, of course, it's a much longer process.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. It's been really neat to see it, and as somebody who has gone in and used the eMuseum, I definitely appreciate being able to see the collection online. I think that the platform is really great to use, and as you mentioned, there are still things that you're tweaking and working out, and with those new features, it's going to be a really great thing to use for sure. So thank you very much for sharing it with us today.
All right, thank you, and please do email us if you have any questions you'd like us to get back to you with.
Yeah, and I will mention that to everybody here as well, that the way I'll be sending you the email is we send out a follow-up email after each of the webinars, and I believe it's scheduled to go out either late tonight or early tomorrow, and so we will include Nathalie's email in that, as well as a link to our follow-up survey. So we do hope that you'll fill and have them. So thank you very much to Nathalie and to Cherie. This is all the time that we have for this month. And let's sort of throw out our next month's topic. The next month will be presented by Rachel Aquarium. If you didn't know that the name switched over, at least as part of the larger rebranding. Rachel will be helping you dive into online learning as she goes over Oceanwise's online education programs and how you can embrace this new technology to help build engagement. Now, Rachel started at the Oceanwise program with very little
The day before my first
experience and almost no budget in online programs. So she has a lot to offer museums of all sizes, sort of regardless of what well, you can see that there was some free, but a little bit early on the webinar registration this month. Some of you have that already. Feel free to use that. Otherwise, you can register online. We also do have some spots open for webinars in 2018. So if you do want to join us as a presenter, we're looking for September, October, and November, and you can find our little proposal form on our website there. So thank you again to Nathalie and to Cherie, and thank you to everybody for joining us. We hope you have a great day, and remember to fill out your survey when it comes into your email. Have a good day.